It won't be easy, it will be controversial, but we're prepared to bear the burden, sir. Thank you.
David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments on this part, and particularly in respect of Part 4, Section 66. The section states that the Regional Council and Minister of Conservation will effectively keep their hands away from fisheries management, and that's in a generic sense, and that's entirely appropriate. However, it goes on to say a Regional Council and the Minister of Conservation may perform the functions specified to control aquaculture activities for the purpose of avoiding, remedying, mitigating effects of aquaculture activities on fishery and fishery resources. So it brings to my mind a very significant question here as to what capacity do our regional councils have to adequately fulfil their existing obligations, their existing duties and responsibilities. I'd be very interested in hearing from the Minister or any other member of a regional council in the country that has sufficient capacity, expertise, knowledge to make considered and appropriate judgments about the likely effect of aquaculture activities on fisheries and fishery resources. This has been an ongoing problem with the Resource Management Act since day one, that regional councils have not been fulfilling their existing obligations. Imposing new, complex obligations, requirements on them is simply going to exacerbate that existing condition. I reflect momentarily on the Kaipara Harbour, one where I've recently spent some time. The Regional Council is under considerable pressure there already to manage to consider their baseline monitoring as a follow-on of the consents around the tidal energy project. We have yet to see a Regional Council in the last 20 years that has been able to employ sufficient scientific capacity to properly assess the condition, the quality of their environment within their area of concern. I would absolutely challenge any member, even those who enjoy shouting rather than making sensible contributions, to come up with some evidence that any regional council has that capacity. And I have genuine concerns that what in reality will happen, that the regional councils will not have the capacity, therefore this requirement for them to look at the likely effects will not be satisfactorily met. There's also a reference in this part to the development of finfish farming in the Hauraki Gulf off the Coromandel coast. And I do hope it's been considered that there is significant local opposition, deep-seated and long-term opposition to this proposition. Once again, we hear that it will rubbish. I'm pleased that this member who's interjecting has moderated her language. In an earlier reading, she used a much cruder word to suggest that the green contribution was below par. The reality is, sir, that fishers are objecting. They are seriously concerned about the likely effect of this proposal to farm high-value species will have on the wild fishery. Boaties, it is a very popular boating area, recreational boating area. Again, that could be compromised. We know there are significant iwi and hapu objections to the proposition of finfish farming based on very sound social, economic and environmental concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There are some amendments. So the question is that the Minister's amendments on SOP number 277 to amendments set out on SOPs 264 and 265 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The motion is agreed to. The question now is that Minister's amendments set out on SOPs 264 and 265 as amended be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The motion is agreed to. The question now is that Part 4 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct the party vote.
New Zealand National.
57 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
24 votes in favour.
Green Party.
7 votes opposed.
Act New Zealand.
2 votes in favour, 3 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
Toko toru e tautoko ana.
Progressive.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Mana. Honourable Chris Carter.
1 vote opposed.
Any other votes?
Ayes are 88, noes are 11. The motion is agreed to. We'll do the questions regarding the schedule. So with regard to Schedule 1, the question is that the Minister's amendments set out on SOP 277 to amendments set out on SOP 264 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The next question is that the Minister's amendments except those to new Schedule 2 set out on SOP 264 as amended and on SOP 278 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Point of order. Certainly.
Let's be clear about this. Right. A lot of shifting around here.
The question is, Minister's amendments except those to new Schedule 2 set out on SOP 264 as amended and on SOP 278 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Schedule 1 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Schedule 1A. The question is that the Minister's amendments as set out on SOP 265 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Schedule 1A as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Schedule 1B. The question is that the Minister's amendments set out on SOPs numbers 265 and 264 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Schedule 1B as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Schedule 2. The question is that Schedule 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Schedule 3. The question is that the Minister's amendments set out on SOP number 264 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 3 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Clauses 1 and 2. The question is that clauses 1 and 2, clause 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Question now is, where do we go from here? Under the page. The question is that the Minister's amendment on SOP number 277 to amend Clause 2 as set out on SOP 264 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Minister's amendments as set out on SOP 264 as amended be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Clause 2 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Take a call. No. Take a call.
Mr. Chairman, I move that